today. UFC 330 is in the books. And your boy Matt took a few losses. The favorites were not favoriting. The fighters that we were betting to win did not win. And we didn't have any money riding on some of those underdogs. So this week's episode of Matter of Fact MMA is brought to you by Top Ramen. That's right. Top Ramen chicken flavor. Because this is what me and my family are going to be eating for weeks to come. Because certain fighters like Abdul don't know how to go out there and do what they were meant to do. That's right. All of this and more on today's episode of Matter of Fact MMA. What's up? What's happening? Let's go. What's up, guys? We right back at it. We right back with it. It's your boy Matt, and we are here to talk about a few takeaways that I had from UFC 330. Because frankly, it's not really a need to go over all of, if anything, really even happened on this card. But I will start with, let's just get it out the way. Let's get it out the way. Mansour Abdul Malik. This dude is not UFC caliber. He's not UFC level. He ain't really built for the fight game. Okay, I just want to kick it off with this. I know this wasn't the main thing that happened at this show, but this is part of why we out here eating Top Ramen. This dude, they gave you a layup. They gave you a layup with Dustin Stoltzfus. Right? This homie Dustin could barely even speak after the fight was over and do a post-fight interview because I don't even think he intended on winning. I don't even think he knew it was going to happen. You know what I'm saying? Mansour Abdul Malik. Bro, that's it, bro. We saw plenty of fights that you won earlier in your UFC career where we were like, man, he looked like he was gassing out. Man, he looked like he barely pulled that one out. Man, he looked like he barely got the job done. Well, now it's full blown. You just ain't getting the job done no more. You got horribly exposed in your last fight against the middleweight Alex Pereira. That's right. And it wasn't Alex Pereira. Then in this fight against Dustin Stoltzfus, which was supposed to be a layup, you got exposed again. You have no defense. You have horrible fight IQ. You take the wrong shots. You take the wrong shot. You have the poor shot selection, poor accuracy, and your coach is Coach Eric Nixick, and you're not even listening to him. Get this guy up out of here. If I had an air horn, brr, 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 that would signal that your UFC career is over. I don't care if you go out there and win your next fight. How low on the totem pole of competition do they have to throw out there for you to get a win? Anyway, get him up out of here. Of course, what am I talking about? Mansour Abdul Malik takes a loss to Dustin Stoltzfus. Round 2, he gets submitted. Get him up out of here. That got Dustin's performance of the night, though. So shout out to him. Let's talk about another performance of the night. Charles Johnson. Mother effing Charles Johnson, my guy, out here styling with that fresh haircut with body on the top and braids at the back. My homie goes out here, gets a huge win, big submission win over Eduardo Chapelin. Now, granted, this is, Chapelin just making his, just trying to make his bones in the UFC. He new to the game. But Charles Johnson went out there like the veteran he was, submits him, gets a performance of the night bonus. Another performance of the night bonus, Jalen Turner, after some suspicious betting activity comes his way the day of the fight, he goes out there and makes short, quick work of Fernandez. After they hyped up Fernandez, they talked about the world famous camp he comes from, Jose Aldo. That they talking about Jose Aldo, and shout out to Jose Aldo, the King of Rio, my featherweight GOAT. After Jose Aldo done talked this dude up and say he could be the next Brazilian champion, Jalen turned and said, and he goes out there, gets Fernandez out. Not only out of there, but gets him out of there quick. Gets him out of there quick. 39 seconds. 39 seconds in the round one. He out of there. Anyway, let me talk about two of my huge takeaways from UFC 330. Mackenzie Dern versus Gillian Robertson. Mackenzie Dern goes out there, gets a dominant 5-round decision win. She dominated Gillian Robertson for 4 rounds. But let's get off into my real takeaway of this fight. Is this asshole Dean Thomas, Coach Dean Thomas. I've always liked Coach Dean Thomas, but in this, you're not coming out ahead. You're coming out the asshole. And let's talk about it. Now, a while ago, Coach Dean Thomas was before Mackenzie Dern became the strawweight champion, Coach Dean Thomas was on a podcast with, I don't even remember who he was on the podcast with. It don't even matter. He's on a podcast and he's asked about the upcoming Mackenzie Dern versus Virna Jandiroba fight, in which he just shitted all over the fight, that it wasn't going to be a huge fight, it wasn't going to be a big fight, wasn't no big deal. He didn't feel like either one of those women were really almost like meant to be fighting for that championship. So, and Mackenzie was kind of in that position based out of her looks and everything. And it's like, Dean Thomas, we know that. We don't have to be talking. You, as a member of the UFC staff, being an analyst, you ain't got to say all that, bro. We didn't need to hear all that from you. We, as the fans and watchers of UFC, we know what time it was when they threw Mackenzie Dern in there with Virna Jandiroba. We knew what time it was, right? So he was very, he was very rude, for lack of any other word I can think of off the top of my head, towards Mackenzie Dern and Virna Jandiroba about their championship fight, which led you to believe that he is the coach. I didn't clarify that. He is the coach of Gillian Robertson, but he is also an analyst for the UFC that they will bring on the broadcast, just voiceover, just voice, in between rounds. So, Joe Rogan, Daniel Cormier, John Anik could be talking. They'll be like, yeah, we're about to start the second round. Coach Dean, what are you seeing out here? And then they'll talk to him. Now, Coach Dean Thomas is known to come in when they call him in and say, just put the bootstraps, put the boots to different fighters. Well, first off, the issue that we're seeing out of Fighter A is they need to wrestle. Their primary game is wrestling, and I don't know why they're not wrestling, but you need to start wrestling quick or you're going to lose this fight. He's known to be a coach or an analyst that will say exactly what needs to be said, get right to the heart of it. And he's never at a loss for words about what is going on into a fight or going on in a fight. Now let's talk about last night's fight as I'm recording this the day after. He's the coach of Gillian Robertson. And, between the first and the second round, he's pretty hard, he's going pretty rough, getting pretty tough on Gillian Robertson about what she needs to do when she goes out there. Right? In between, and she goes out there and she's not really able to implement anything he was talking about. Right? And then, in between, I think it was the third and the fourth round, he's like, homie says to her, "What's wrong with your legs? What's wrong with your legs? How come you're not moving?" And you're like, okay, And let me preface this a little bit more. Let me paint this picture for you a little bit better. If you've been watching mixed martial arts, or if you're a lame in the UFC for a long time, you know there are some fights where you have fighters and their coaches, and they have worked on a game plan, and the game plan would probably win them the fight. But for whatever reason, the fighter goes out there and cannot implement the game plan, not based out of their opponent is that good where they can't implement the game plan, but it's more based out of they're just not taking the chance to do what their coach has instructed or trained them to do, or they don't necessarily believe what their coach has instructed them to do or what the game plan is. They don't believe that it's going to work once they're in there in real time with their opponent. Or, which is what this instance is, their opponent is too well prepared or is a half a step faster or a little bit stronger than what they believe their opponent would be, or flat out their opponent is just too damn good for the fighter to implement what they have worked on with their coach. And that's what the case was. It didn't matter what the game plan was for Gillian Robertson. Mackenzie Dern last night, whether you're a fan of her or whether you're not a fan of her, whether you think she made it to where she's at based out of her looks, or whether you really respect her skills and talents, last night Mackenzie Dern was just too good. She was a step ahead. She was everything that is positive. And it didn't matter what game plan Gillian Robertson, didn't matter what Coach Dean Thomas was telling her, she was not going to beat Mackenzie Dern last night. And so, when you're talking about the first round plays out and she gets dominated by Mackenzie Dern on the feet and on the ground, and Dean Thomas is like, you got to move. You can't stand in front of her. You got to move around. We got to add some intensity, blah, 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 right? I'm paraphrasing. Those might have not been his real words. But at the same time, Coach Dean Thomas, he's doing an okay job. When we get between the second and third round, that's when you're like, yo, okay, Dean Thomas, this homie, he's really getting upset now. You know what I'm saying? This homie, when he asked this fighter, what's wrong with your legs? It wasn't like, hey, why are you not moving? What's going on? Let's stick to the game plan. When you just flat out ask your fighter, what's wrong with your legs? You know what I'm saying? Hey, what's wrong with your legs? That's where we getting into other territory. But then the kicker was going into the fifth round. So we're between the fourth and the fifth round when they go to the corner of Gillian Robertson, who has been getting dominated, just embarrassed for 4 rounds on the feet and on the ground. But one thing you could kind of somewhat see at the end of the fourth is just maybe Mackenzie might be starting to get tired. What you saw was Coach Dean Thomas in between the fourth and the fifth round, instead of trying to rouse his fighter and really get her going, engage with her, give that remember the Titans type speech. You know what I'm saying? Giving her, go in there and give her one of them Mighty Ducks type speeches that gets everybody into it. One of them Bad News Bears. If you're old enough to know what that is, give them one of them speeches. You know what I'm saying? Give them one of them speeches. If you really want to see a good MMA example of that, watch the speech that Leon Edwards' coach gave him before he went out there and knocked out Kamaru Usman. When he told him, "You're letting him bully your son." Bro, it's one of the best, most motivating speeches you will see. To motivate your fighter to go out there and do what? what Leon Edwards did. After he had been getting dominated and embarrassed for the entire fight by Kamaru Usman for the welterweight championship of the world, and Leon Edwards rose to the occasion, listened to what his coach told him. It motivated him. His coach didn't really give him the key. He didn't tell him to shoot that head kick. He didn't tell him to throw that. But he motivated him. He let him know you're still in this and you can still do this. Another example is when you see Francis Ngannou defending his heavyweight championship of the world against Cyril Gane. And Francis is out there on one leg because his other leg, it was blown out. The knee was blown out going into that fight. Francis can't even stand and throw shots anymore. He's got to wrestle. And Coach Eric Nixon is in the corner and he looks at Francis in the eyes and he says, "You can do this. I believe in you." That's what Gillian Robertson needed. What she got in between rounds, and the commentators mentioned as much, DC mentioned it, is Dean Thomas is silent. So they get to the corner. Gillian Robertson is dejected. She's got her head down on the stool. Coach Dean Thomas walks up. He has nothing to say. Nobody's talking. He goes, "Here, get you some water. Get some water." He tells her to get some water. Then after that, he's silent. He has nothing for her. Then he says, you know what we got to do now. You know what we got to do. You got to get her on the ground up against the cage. That's her only shot. And it was about all the homie said. That was about all the homie said. That was about all the homie said. He didn't tell her how to get her there. He didn't tell her what to do. Once she got Mackenzie there, he didn't say nothing. That's all he said, and he left it alone, and he was quiet and sent her back out there. Now, why was this terrible? Of course, this is horrible coaching. Of course, does nothing for your fighter. But more importantly, what was admitted by Mackenzie Dern after the fight at the post-fight press conference is that she was tired. She admitted her legs got tired to Joe Rogan at the post-fight speech. But in the post-fight press conference, she talked about she was tired from all of the grappling and all the work she put in for 4 rounds. She admitted she was tired. And that round was the only round Gillian Robertson won. That was the only one she won. And she went out there, and once it went to the ground, Mackenzie had nothing left for her. And Gillian just kind of was on top of her, just making moves. Just dropping little elbows, little shots, but nothing of any real significance. Because she was still dejected and she couldn't recognize the opportunity that of Leon Edwards recognized, that a Francis Ngannou had that mental fortitude given to him from his coach in between rounds to recognize, to defeat Cyril Gane, Leon Edwards to defeat Kamaru Usman. She had nothing, so she just went out there and dropped little 12-6 elbows and little regular elbows, little shots. Did nothing. And Mackenzie was tired, and this could have been one of the best, one of the biggest comeback stories in strawweight history. And she had nothing for it. And then to top it all off, to cap the whole evening for Coach Dean Thomas, at the end of the night, the show is already ended. UFC 330's ended. And generally, if you continue to watch, I don't a lot, but sometimes I do. I like watching the post-fight press conference, which is generally on YouTube. But if you stay watching Paramount's coverage, the UFC has their panel and their analysts, and they talk at the desk afterwards. Dean Thomas said some negative things about Gillian Robertson's performance. This is her coach. You know, a lot of coaches take it on the chin and say it was their fault. A lot of coaches, when they're talked to after, they say it was their fault. They didn't prepare their fighter well. They take all the heat. They rarely put it on the fighter, because you have to think about it from the fighter's mindset. She just was dominated for 4 rounds straight and did absolutely nothing to Mackenzie Dern, but she won the 5th round. And this is her title shot. Gillian Robertson is not like a fighter that you ever would have really expected to get a title shot. Years ago, when you're thinking of Gillian Robertson, you're not thinking of a title challenger. So the fact she was able to string together this many wins and go out there and challenge for the championship, and she got dominated, man, this is rough for her. This is embarrassing. This is sad. She's in a dark place. And Coach Dean Thomas goes out the table and says, you know, he couldn't believe what was going on, what she wasn't doing out there, talked about what they had worked on, and she just didn't do it, just didn't do nothing. And then said, and as a result of that, I'm retiring. I will no longer corner fighters at all. I'm done. Way to make it about you, homie. Thanks, Dean Thomas. Way to make it about you, bro. So that was the end of that. That was it. Dean Thomas, Gillian Robertson. I don't know where she goes from here, because not only did she get dominated for 4 rounds straight, had an embarrassing showing, lost the fight, did not win the championship, but on top of that, now she got to find a whole new coach because Dean Thomas done quit. So that was that. Final takeaway from UFC 330, and I'll make this quick. Habib, or Khabib, if you're American like me and we're slow to how you pronounce people's names or the way they pronounce it, Habib Nurmagomedov is truly a genius and might be psychic and ahead of his time. And why am I saying that? It wasn't about what he predicted Islam Makhachev was going to do or what his father's plan, any of that, what it predicted that was going to happen with Islam Makhachev. But it's more so about when Khabib or Habib left the sport. He left the sport, of course, because his father had passed away tragically during that time period that we were all locked in the crib a few years ago. He passed away tragically due to complications from that. But what's very interesting about this is when they asked Habib about fighting again, and it's been brought up, and Dana White made him multiple big money offers and probably still continues to make him offers to try to entice him to come out of retirement. He made it clear that no matter how good of a fighter you are, you can't stay at the top forever. And eventually there's a decline, and it's generally a sharp one. And he wasn't really willing to go there with his own career. He wanted to leave on top. So not only had he lost his father and he didn't want to continue to fight any longer after losing his father, because it just didn't mean the same to him without his father on the outside coaching him. It was also a matter of he realized, even though my skills haven't declined yet, they will. And when that happens, what am I going to do? Right? And he said that much about a lot of the GOAT, considered to be GOAT fighters in the sport, that you can't stay at the top forever, and eventually your skills will begin to fade and fail you. And when that time happens, it's time to exit the sport. Right? With that being said, I'm not saying that Islam Makhachev has fallen off per se, and I'm not saying that he needs to exit the sport. Far from that. But I do believe that Islam Makhachev is in a weird position, because I believe that the homie, he's best suited for like a 165 pound division, right? Or a 160 pound division, because he's just thick enough, he's just big enough that it's hard for him to lose that weight each time he had to cut weight down to 155. And it takes a toll on him. But down at 155, he ragdolls men. He has his way. He does whatever he wants. But it's such a strenuous, hard weight cut. And then at 170 pounds, even though he looked great against Jack Della Maddalena, the end of the day, those guys, I believe, a lot of them are too big for Islam Makhachev. I think 170 is a little bit too big. And with that being said, I don't think he can implement his game and keep his stamina and his endurance the same way that he could at 155, at 170, because it's a much larger body, a much larger individual that you've got to control and toss around and handle for possibly 5 rounds straight. And so as he goes out there, and he does pretty handily, in my opinion, defeat Ian Machado Garry. At the same time, he was gassed in that 5th round. His face was marked up, you know, and you never really looked like Ian Machado Garry really touched him up that much, but his face was all busted up and everything. He was bleeding, and it's like, after that title defense, good luck. Because, you know, the next guy, if the next guy is Carlos Praches, if that's the next guy, good luck, because he's a big individual. Long, rangy, tall welterweight. Similar to Ian Machado Garry. Right? And granted, nowhere near the level of grappling and wrestling that Ian Machado Garry showed that he possesses, you know, after being coached by Damian Maia, legend of the sport. He's still a big guy, but let's just say Islam can go out there against Carlos Praches and defeat him, right? Go out there and beat him. You know, maybe his wrestling really is that bad that, you know, Islam Makhachev gets him down, wrestles him, gets a 5-round decision, or taps him out on the ground, right? Good luck with Michael Morales. Good luck with that big SOB. That dude is huge. He's not only tall, he's thick, he's muscular, he's younger. Man, he's known to walk around in almost like 225 pounds between fight camps. Man, good luck trying to wrestle that dude, grapple that dude. Good luck trying to Dagestani handcuff that big homie for 5 rounds straight. So that's why I say when you you go back in the day, if you've been watching long enough, GSP versus Johnny Hendricks for the welterweight championship, where I'm a GSP fan. He's on my wall. So I gave him, wink, wink, the edge that he beat Johnny Hendricks, but man, it was looking rough. And the next thing you know, GSP's retired until he comes back against Michael Bisping. You know, some of them last few fights of the other guy on my wall, John Jones. We're not counting the Stipe fight. But man, that Dom Reyes fight, some of them fights, man, you was just kind of like, okay, even though I wink, 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 tried to give my guy the nod. You know, you see some of these goats of the sport. Anderson Silva, also on my wall. Another goat of the sport. Some of them last few fights, man, it was looking rough for Anderson. So just maybe Khabib was a genius and way further, way more, however you want to word that, ahead of the game than what we thought. And I'm not saying Islam Makhachev looked bad or needs to retire or anything like that. But if he's going to continue in the welterweight division, which I would assume he is, he's going to have to figure out something. Because you don't want to be in there grappling guys like Michael Morales and think you're going to last 5 rounds. So that's it. That was UFC 330. Those were my takeaways from that. You know, Coach Dean Thomas is a prick. Khabib Nurmagomedov is psychic. He's Nostradamus. And, you know, Mansour Abdul Malik needs to just hang it up, you know, because he ain't got it. He might be able to have it for MVP's cards, you know, MVP PFL. He can head over there, but bro, we don't need you around here. You know, that's just a few of my takeaways. You know, shout out to Gillian Robertson. I know she took that loss. Keep your head up, because obviously now you also lost your coach. Shout out to Islam Makhachev as he continues remains the welterweight champion. And shout out to Dustin Stoltzfus, who goes out there and shows why Mansour Abdul Malik, whatever his name is, it needs to be put the gloves down in the octagon. Anyway, like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. And once again, I do want to thank you guys for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA. And I'll check you next time. Peace.